For years, Ppop existed on the margins of the global conversation, celebrated at home, overlooked abroad. Then, a single statement altered the narrative. A PMCA executive producer, someone with the authority to launch careers or halt them with a single decision, publicly highlighted SB19’s Acon 2025 performance. This wasn't fan enthusiasm or promotional hype. It was professional assessment, the kind of language that influences touring investment, festival billing, and future bookings. What happened on that stage didn't simply impress, it forced a recalibration. And once the industry adjusts its perspective, it rarely reverts. This is why moments like this matter. Fan support is loud, passionate, and vital, but it lives in comments, trends, and timelines. Industry recognition operates on a different plane. It shows up in contracts signed, budgets approved, and doors opened or quietly closed. When a senior executive speaks, they're not reacting emotionally, they're weighing risk, scalability, and long-term value, the elements that shape an artist's trajectory. An executive producer at this level isn't just a title, it's a gatekeeping position at the peak of global entertainment. These are the people overseeing major award shows, international broadcasts, and productions involving massive financial stakes. Their responsibility is to identify what's viable before the broader market fully catches on. That's why their words resonate long after the moment passes. What makes this instance exceptional is its visibility. Executives of this stature rarely comment publicly on individual artists. Silence is standard. Approval usually happens behind closed doors. When acknowledgement becomes public, it signals that something has crossed a line too clear to overlook. And shifts like that don't just recognize success, they change the landscape. This wasn't an offhand remark or casual observation. It was a signal aimed squarely at promoters, broadcasters, and industry decision-makers. When someone at that level chooses to speak publicly, it's because silence would look negligent. Performances like that don't get ignored. They quietly redirect careers, not through press releases, but through shifted priorities and real consequences. Acon isn't just another stop on the concert calendar. It's a high-stakes global platform. Every artist on that stage is competing for more than applause. They're being evaluated for credibility, future invitations, and international staying power. The scale alone raises the bar. Major production value, major media presence, and an audience conditioned to judge quickly and move on even faster.
SB19’s placement on the lineup mattered because it challenged perception. They weren't tucked away as an opening act or framed as a regional curiosity. They were positioned where expectations peak, where performers either hold their ground or fade out. And that's where the narrative shifted. The crowd reaction told the immediate story. Strong engagement, loud responses, visible connection. But the media response told the more consequential one. Coverage focused on execution, not origin. Clips were replayed, commentary centered on performance quality rather than novelty. That distinction is crucial. Visually, the set was sharp and assured. Choreography landed with accuracy. Live vocals held steady under pressure. Transitions were smooth, controlled, unhurried. Nothing felt like overcompensation. Most importantly, SB19 didn't move like guests borrowing space. They moved like artists who belonged on that stage. That's what demanded attention. Not hype, not fandom, but professionalism on a platform designed to expose weaknesses. What stood out to the PMCA executive producer wasn't just what happened, but how it happened. Precision was the first indicator. Every movement hit cleanly on count. No rushing, no uncertainty. That level of synchronization only comes from intense rehearsal and deep trust among performers. To industry veterans, precision translates directly to reliability. Then there was audience command. Acon's crowd wasn't homogeneous. It was multilingual, multicultural, and carrying different expectations. SB19 didn't lean on easy call-and-response tactics or pre-built chants. They held attention through performance alone. And in a space like that, sustained attention is the clearest proof of legitimacy. They held attention through control, measured pacing, deliberate body language, and quiet confidence. That level of command is uncommon, especially for artists coming from outside the industry's dominant markets. What sealed it was the live vocals under pressure. Loud stages are unforgiving. At that volume and scale, backing tracks can't mask unstable breath control or shaky pitch. SB19 delivered clean, steady vocals while executing demanding choreography, making it clear they weren't merely getting through the set, they were in command of it. The transitions mattered just as much: how songs connected, where pauses were placed, how energy rose and released. This is the architecture of a show. Industry professionals notice when a performance feels designed rather than assembled on the fly. Viral moments fade quickly. Anyone can trend for seconds. Precision, structure, and control are repeatable, and that's what producers value far more than hashtags or spikes in engagement. Those details signal whether an artist can deliver consistently anywhere. Behind the scenes, the global music industry sorts artists quietly but decisively. There are developing acts, there are emerging acts, and then there are assets. Assets are performers trusted with major stages, large budgets, and international audiences. The transition from promising to bankable doesn't come with announcements, but once it happens, everything shifts. Most artists never make that jump. Talent alone isn't enough. Reliability, professionalism, and scalability matter more.
At Acon 2025, SB19 crossed that threshold. Not because of popularity, but because they demonstrated they could meet the same performance standards as established global acts. For promoters and festival organizers, that reframes the conversation entirely. SB19 stops being a risk or a diversity slot and becomes a booking that strengthens a lineup. That leads to better time placements, repeat invitations, and long-term planning. This is also where the regional act label begins to fall away, a label that quietly restricts routing, budgets, and media framing. Once it's gone, opportunities expand rapidly. Acon wasn't just a strong showing, it was a reclassification. SB19 crossed a line at Acon 2025, from being observed to being relied on, and that kind of shift doesn't reverse. The most significant outcomes don't come wrapped in announcements or press headlines, they unfold quietly. The first signs are subtle: invitations to return, no longer as placeholders, but with stronger positioning, better billing, extended set times, and slots that matter. Promoters remember who delivers when the pressure is real, and they plan accordingly. Brand relationships evolve in the same way. Companies aren't chasing momentary buzz alone, they prioritize dependability and cross-cultural reach. Acon demonstrated that SB19 can carry a brand on an international stage without friction or risk. That proof changes the balance of power in negotiations, from endorsement value to creative input and long-term partnerships. Touring discussions shift as well. Promoters and venues look for acts that can not only sell tickets, but sustain performance quality night after night. SB19's showing sent a clear message: this is a group that scales. That opens doors to broader routing, stronger production support, and firmer guarantees. Behind the scenes, collaborators start paying attention. Producers, choreographers, and fellow artists rarely make their interest public. They watch. One undeniable performance can move an act from interesting to worth reaching out to. That's how industry momentum works. It accumulates steadily, almost invisibly. Unlike viral hype that flares and disappears, this kind of movement becomes evident months later when opportunities compound and access expands. What happened at Acon 2025 wasn't just pivotal for SB19, it resonated outward. It pushed the global industry to reassess Ppop as a legitimate market, not a novelty, not a test case, but a source of world-class talent. The moment echoes early K-pop breakthrough stages, when a single performance disrupted entrenched assumptions. Back then, success didn't arrive overnight. It began with quiet curiosity, followed by deliberate investment. SB19's Acon performance follows that same trajectory almost exactly. The industry's lens on Southeast Asia is shifting. Large audiences and powerful fan ecosystems were already visible. What was missing was consistent proof of execution at a truly global level. Acon provided that.
SB19 didn't benefit from relaxed standards or special framing. They met the highest ones, and in doing so, they demonstrated a critical change. Excellence now leads. Origin no longer defines expectation. Performance does. That shift is substantial. SB19 becomes a benchmark. Future Ppop acts won't be measured against assumptions. They'll be measured against what SB19 has already proven. That's how movements begin. Not with proclamations, but with evidence that can't be dismissed. Appearing at Acon 2025 was never a guaranteed success. It was a strategic risk. Global stages bring global scrutiny. Every detail is assessed not only by fans, but by executives, producers, and promoters trained to identify weaknesses instantly. One misstep can reinforce skepticism. One shaky moment can undo years of progress. There was no margin to hide. Sound systems magnify flaws. Cameras expose everything. Comparisons happen in real time. That pressure is why many artists play it safe. Simplified choreography, heavier reliance on backing tracks, minimized risk. SB19 chose a different path, and that choice mattered. Instead of masking the performance with excess, they trusted their fundamentals. Clean staging, precise choreography, live vocals placed front and center. The result wasn't spectacle for its own sake, but confidence under scrutiny. And on a stage designed to test credibility, that restraint spoke louder than any embellishment. That level of creative confidence is a gamble. When you strip things back, there's nowhere to hide, and that exposure can be unforgiving. But it also signals belief in the craft itself. To industry professionals, excessive production can impress in the moment, yet it often reads as compensation rather than confidence. SB19 avoided that pitfall. They chose authenticity instead of overload, clarity instead of chaos. The payoff wasn't just applause, it was credibility, real credibility. They demonstrated they could deliver without shortcuts. On a stage where many performers aim simply to get through, SB19 aimed to hold their ground. That distinction is why the risk paid off and why the performance continues to resonate. This wasn't a fleeting spike, it was a recalibration. The next 2 to 3 years will likely define SB19's legacy phase, not because they're slowing down, but because they're moving into a higher tier. Expect fewer reactive moves and more deliberate ones, fewer appearances but stronger positioning, larger platforms, tighter execution. Growth becomes strategic rather than noisy. What happened at Acon 2025 didn't announce itself with spectacle or spectacle-driven headlines. It didn't need to. The industry recognized it because it understands the difference between volume and validation. SB19 didn't seize attention through excess, they earned it through performance. Moments like this are rare, and when they happen, they don't repeat, they reset the standard. Years from now, when people ask when the narrative shifted, the answer will be simple. This stage, this performance, this response. If you value analysis that goes beyond trends and timelines, subscribe. If this helped clarify the shift you just witnessed, leave a like. And if someone you know still underestimates what occurred, share this with them, because this wasn't a breakthrough, it was confirmation.